by the time we enacted it, we were absolutely drowned in and we swamped.
That can be a challenge. I'm sure you've experienced it. Right now, the most tax efficient way for any business owner to get money out is
Okay, good morning, Phil.
Morning, Neil.
We're here again in the Vision to Venture series. Today we're talking everything finance and accounting, and I brought Phil along, my master accountant. If I can introduce you,
I'll tell you that one. Called a lot worse.
And we're really talking about accounting from a startup's perspective. So I guess the first question I want to really ask is, you obviously see a lot of new businesses in your line of work, and really, what are some of the pitfalls you see that startups make in heading off into their new ventures from a financial perspective?
Yeah, we do deal with a lot of startups and new businesses, and we quite proactive in looking for those. The biggest pitfall is going to be money, and because most people that you're dealing with, they're operating to a different time frame, but you need something doing straight away. Rarely people reacting in the same time frame as what you want them to. So if you need something doing in a month, expect it might take 3 or 4 months. So when you're doing your planning for your budget, it's going to take a lot longer for the money to start rolling in than what you think. So that's a biggie.
Yeah, so you're sort of talking in terms of they're building an expectation on how quick the business is going to grow. And
exactly. You might be doing your cash flow that you can start getting money in 30 days. Rarely the case. You're waiting for someone somewhere else to sign a contract that you really need by the end of the week. It's going to be the end of the month, because it's one of 100 things that they're dealing with. It's your one out of one. And so everything takes a bit longer than what you want it to. So when you're doing your initial planning, take into account that it's going to take longer to come to fruition.
Yeah, well, I've got a great experience of that. When I first set up over in Australia, my business partner and I, we put a plan together, put it in front of our wives, showing the curve going like this, look at the revenue, and then 14 months later it was a bit of a blip and it just took a bit to get going.
Absolutely that. And one bit of advice, if you're getting involved with a friend or a family member, proceed with caution. You might start out the best of friends, but you can start kind of veering off. One wants to have a break more often than the other one. Somebody wants to work 7 days a week. Somebody sees it more as a lifestyle business, and bear that in mind. And one bit of advice I always give to our partnerships or people coming together is sit together often, away from the business. Go for a coffee, go for a pint, go for a meal, where the focus you're talking about what the business plan is. Not this contract, not that.
Yeah,
where you're going.
On the business rather than in it.
Yeah, and get things like shareholder agreements in place. Set things out in writing at the start when it's good, rather than trying to deal with it if it falls down later.
So is there a logical set of steps then for actually establishing a business? I know it'll be different across different countries, but like here in the UK, what are the sort of steps?
But the first thing for many people is deciding whether to become a sole trader or a limited company. The tax advantages change budget by budget. Currently, there's very little in it.
Yep.
But it's one thing to bear in mind at the start, whether you want to be a sole trader, be a limited company. There's more involved in being a limited company. There's more regulatory requirements, certainly on our side, where we have to report to Companies House as well as HMRC.
Yep.
There are a lot of pros and cons to both, but it's one to kind of think about at the start. And I had a phone call yesterday afternoon with somebody who's like, I don't know which way to go, and we sat and we discussed everything, where they're looking to go. They're going to start as a sole trader and maybe later down the line become a limited company. But that's a good starting point.
Yeah, and it's flexible enough to do that.
Yeah, and then from there, start building your business plan and your budget. And like I say, build it on a worst case scenario. You might think you're going to take over the world in 12 months, but it's going to take a lot longer.
So I see a lot of small businesses who they're kind of scared of the finances. They don't know really where to start in, building up what might be a future cash flow statement or a profit and loss. And they really struggle in that space, to the point where I know I've brought startups to you where I've had to hold the hand in the first initial meeting with the accountant because they're not sure where to go. What sort of advice might you give them?
The first bit of advice is seek support from people who have been through it before in your field of expertise. So if you know somebody who's started up or works in it, and take it to them. Get their input. people like yourself who support and mentor other businesses, and then come and have a chat with people like us. You know, because we say, have you thought about all the insurances that you're going to need? And, you know, like public liability. And, you know, we see some people, they put the salary in, but they forget they've got employers, national insurance, they've got pension contributions to make. You don't think about that. You know, you just say, oh, I'm paying somebody 30 grand a year, I'm paying 30 grand a year. Actually more like 40 once everything comes on. So all those kind of things that, you know, seek support. Don't bury your head and go, I know what I'm doing. You might know that bit, but take advice from other people.
I see a lot of startups, if you were to put a profit and loss statement in front of them, they are totally overwhelmed. Yet, you know, fundamentally, it's fairly straightforward in my mind. You know, you've got the money that comes in, you've got the cost of getting that money, and then you've got all your expenses on top of that. But people struggle with that.
I would say that's where you're from a business background, and with all due respect to people from different backgrounds, people might have dropped out of school at 14, 15, haven't done the maths and don't understand that. They know how to do what they're brilliant at, be it building a wall, fixing a car or whatever. They don't know that bit. You know, and we as a business like to support people getting started and explain it. We'll bring them in and go line by line, and that's what this is, and that's where that's from. And the penny does drop. We do have some clients who go, I've no idea, I'm signing it, I trust you, which is great, you know, but equally, we're always there to answer those questions. You know, I had a client, she came in last night for about an hour and a half, and we literally went through every line of the accounts and what feeds it. She wanted to understand it.
Yeah.
And like I say, you know, you've got the balance sheet as well and where the two tie together. And yeah, it's different. You know, when you're used to doing a job, now you've got to consider the profit and loss and why is that high? Where can I make savings to boost?
And you'll have a good idea because you'll see a lot of accounts and you'll know sort of a benchmark for what people should be paying for stuff.
Absolutely. So we've got best part of 1,000 clients now, maybe a little bit more, across a massive range of industries. Absolutely everything. Yeah, we know what's normal. And you know, we were talking about this yesterday with a client about they're paying a lot more for their insurance than somebody else. So they've gone back and had a look and gone back to the insurance company and going, why am I paying so much more than what my competitors are? I think he's managed to save about a grand a year in doing so. So it's, yeah, we see it and we will point it out and say, this is a lot higher than what somebody else pays. Why? Yeah. Sometimes there's a reason for it. Yeah. Sometimes people just, you know, it's that thing like, my mum, after my dad passed away, they've been with the same insurance company for 20 odd years because that's what they do. I got involved. I saved her 500 quid because I shopped around for it. Yeah. And the same can happen in business. That I've always used that supplier, and you're loyal to them, but you shop around and say, oh, something's quite a lot cheaper. Yeah.
What about businesses where they're sort of, okay, we're past that startup phase, we've gone past the 2, 3, 4, 5 year mark, and we're ready to grow? What are the sorts of pitfalls you see in that space? Because I see a lot of people struggle to go from what's ticking over and you know, working nice for them to then try and expand, and they sort of lose their way there, and some implode. I've seen that.
It is a common problem. You lose a lot of what you were to start out with, you know, because when you're running the business of 1 or 2 people, then it becomes 10, 50, 100. You're a lot less involved than you were previously, and it can be hard to let go of certain things as well. That can be a challenge. I'm sure you've experienced it before, and I certainly have. As we've grown as a business, I need you to do that, and is that? I've always done that.
When we were planning again over in Australia, Chris and myself, and we decided, right, it's time to grow. We had a plan of when we wanted to grow, and you know, once we got to so much of our billable time being used, it was time to bring an employee. But we just kept going. Yeah. We went past that. We didn't actually enact it. By the time we enacted it, we were absolutely drowned in and we swamped. And then one of the things we didn't do, we didn't really plan well for our first employee. We brought her on board, and then we were missing some stuff from a HR perspective. You know, what do we need to do to onboard her? We hadn't got anything to onboard, so we had to create all of that. And that took 3 or 4 months to get that going.
Yeah. And it also then eats up your time as a manager, that you're not just dealing with clients, you've got to look after your staff and all the other things that come with it. And you don't then just become in my case, an accountant. I also do HR, health and safety, business development stuff, sales and marketing.
The director of everything.
IT, yeah. I wear about 25 different hats at times. And what you set out to do, you're doing lots of other things as well. So it's kind of, you've got to plan your time well,
Yeah.
you know, and getting support, and again reaching out to people who've been through the same things, you know, and asking the question, much like you're doing here, is like, what were the issues that you encountered, and what can I do to mitigate it so I don't end up in the same position? And also, just jumping back to something I said earlier, the budgeting side of things. It's, I can afford to pay a person, but what if the order books take 6 months longer to come through? So always plan in the worst case, not the best. So cause what you don't want to do is bring somebody in, this order doesn't happen, that falls through, and you have to lay them off. It's never a good look, especially if you've got multiple staff. People get twitchy, and you can start losing people.
So if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at the numbers, what's the most important thing I should be looking at and keeping my eye on?
Cash flow is the most important thing. You know, planning your cash flow. But I'm saying that, but equally, you can do a spreadsheet for the next 3 years. You may as well put it straight in the bin, because it never works out that way. Have a good idea of what's going to happen, but again, worst case it. You know, and say cash flow is vital. You don't want to be scratching around trying to make payroll every month. You need to make sure you've always got that buffer to cover things.
Cash is king.
Absolutely. You know, and somebody's 60 days late paying you, what is the impact on?
I think that's one of my learnings in business, particularly when I started to get a bit bigger and we started to win some government contracts. You know, I didn't realise the bureaucracy involved in the process of signing off your invoice and getting the actual money. And you know, we had a lot of money owing, and it took nearly 2.5 months to actually that cash to hit the business from an invoice going. And even though we got a contract saying it's 30 days, it actually didn't work like that. And no matter how hard we tried, you could not get the bureaucracy arm to move.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of clients who deal with government agencies, and they all say exactly the same kind of thing, that it's a slow wheel in motion. You know, we had one who was going for some funding, but it took so long for that government department to react. He was into his next year, and they were saying, those accounts no longer apply. We need to start from scratch after 6 months of going through it, and that's not unusual. So again, kind of reiterating what I spoke about before, plan for it to be a lot longer. You know, so don't start employing people assuming that everything's going to happen day one. So
it's affordable to you.
Plan around that. Say cash is king. You say.
And then from I'll shift the perspective a little bit. So I'm a business owner now. And obviously, you know, I want to make sure that I'm running a tax-efficient business from a perspective of tax. But I also want to start looking after my own wealth.
Yeah.
What are some of the things I should be thinking about there as a business owner now, where I've got my entity, it's ticking along and working well? What are the things I should think about as an owner?
So as a business, so some of the tax efficiencies that we had in the past have all gone, and they're always changing. And as a practice, we try and get that message out to clients a couple of times a year of be thinking about this and do that. Right now, the most tax efficient way for any business owner to get money out is via pension contributions, because that has a benefit. It reduces your profits, reduces your corporation tax, and the money goes to you. If you take it out as a dividend, you're going to pay at least 8.75, if not more, percent to the government in tax. If you put it into a pension, you don't have that. It reduces your tax bill and puts money aside. For me and you, Neil, pensions are a little bit closer than for perhaps some of the people watching this. But it's a thing I do try and talk about with a lot of our clients.
Yep.
You might only be 25 at the moment. Those years fly by, as we could probably attest to. It's like it's gone. The earlier you put that money into a pension, it's only going to grow. Compound interest and all that. I won't bore people with it. But it's one of those things that the earlier you put your money in, it benefits you long term. So I often sit with clients who are younger. That's ages away. It's like, it might be. Look at what you're going to save in tax. If you're saving 8, 10, 15 grand a year for the next decade, that's great. You know, and it improves the cash flow of your business and sets you up and means you can retire maybe a couple of years younger than you otherwise would have done.
If only.
Yeah, but say, in terms of planning, putting money into a pension is probably the best thing any business owner can do.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and other than that, say dividends are the next best thing. There are all lots of little bits and pieces that you can do. If you're an employee of your limited company, you can have trivial benefits, it's called, where you can take out up to £300 a year, buying like vouchers that you you see at the end of a supermarket aisle. So for Amazon or whatever, so you can use that. It's a tax efficient way to get £300 out. It costs you nothing and it saves the company £60 of tax. So it's little things like that are things you can do. But yeah, dividends, pensions, and little bits and pieces.
And what are the sort of trends that you're seeing locally now in terms of the businesses that you're working with? Is that, I guess it's going to be different in all parts of the country, but locally, because I'm pretty passionate about Hensford and Cannock and my local community. Having been away for 17 years and now back in it, I'm keen to hear what the trends are from businesses that you're working with.
Very good question. And so we work across a broad spectrum of industries, and we do see different industries in different positions to others. The national insurance increase has impacted a lot of businesses. A lot of employers are now having to put hold on recruitment and asking a little bit more from their staff. It's a big increase. So that's certainly impacted a number of our clients. The high street is struggling. We've seen a lot of high street businesses really. I don't like to talk negatively. Like I say, I'm a big supporter of Hensford. I'm Hensford born and bred. It's a few years ago, and it's great still being on the high street. But like we were talking about just before this interview, some days you can walk down that high street and it's me. We've got a big Tesco around the corner, which impacts. But everybody does stuff online. You buy from Amazon and it comes the next day without you having to go into the town. And it is an issue. But equally, I can be guilty of that as well.
Yeah, we all can.
I want a book, I'll order it, it comes the next day rather than having to drive out somewhere because there's no bookshops in Hensford.
That's not quite true.
But with the book that I want,
fair enough.
Say, I do pop into the bookshop in Hensford, but if I want a certain one, it's got to be Amazon. Otherwise, I've got a 20-minute drive into Walsall to get it from there. So it's not great. It's a tough one.
And are you seeing much shift to the digital world in terms of business?
Not massively. Perhaps that's partly our client base. A lot of our clients aren't massively into that world. Perhaps got a small number, and it's great. We've got a number of computer game developers on our books. My background is in game development, so I've kept my hand in there. So they're obviously very digital heavy. We've got a couple of digital marketing companies, but it's small. And a lot of our smaller clients don't even have websites. They get their business from word of mouth. They don't. I had one come in the other day. He's like, I don't need to advertise. I've got more work. I've actually got to turn people away. And in fact, I met one a couple of weeks ago. They've turned the website off.
Oh, really?
They've got so much work from word of mouth. What they don't want is people calling up and they say, I can't see you for 6 months. That's not great. So they've actually turned it off. It's a rarity, but it does happen.
So one last thing then, before we wrap it up. If I walk in here into your office with a business idea, what's the one piece of advice you'd give me?
Good question, that one. I suppose it's going back to a point I've made before. That's a good question. You've put me on the spot here now.
That's okay.
Is it something that you are passionate about and really want to do? You're going to have a lot of pitfalls along the way. And you've got to be prepared to deal with the rough as well as the smooth. Running your own business, so I think some people think, you're a business fat cat, you're going to make all this money, you work 1 day a week and the rest of it's on the beach. I'm sure me and you exchange emails 7 days a week at those. It was at 9:30 last night, we're exchanging emails. You never switch off. And it's really important that you've got support from people around you. I think that's probably, a really important thing to consider.
You've got to be persistent in business, and you've got to, there's a lot come at you, like you say.
And if you've got a customer emailing you late at night, you don't want to respond to it quickly. And it's important you've got your family supporting you in that, rather than going, turn that phone off or whatever. It's like, that's your entity. You've got to look after your customers because that's where your word of mouth starts, like I was talking about. You've got to make your customers feel special and wanted. And going planning for the worst, but hoping for the best. You know, if you almost plan around the worst case eventuality, anything's going to be better than that.
Yeah, there's always going to be upside there.
Yeah. And so things don't always work out as you want them to, but also keep reviewing that business plan. Yeah. Keep coming back to it every 3 or 6 months. Things change, and you can get yourself kind of caught up in something or other. You're not always reviewing where you want to be going to.
Yeah, I see a lot of businesses who they put the business plan together, they get going, and 12 months later they go back and go, "Oh, we never hit anything we said."
Yeah.
And like I'm interviewing Claire later, and you know,
Yeah.
Claire, and we've just looked at her first quarter and said, right, okay, that's your first stepping stone, but you want to replace salary by the end of the year. What's your next quarter got to look like? Your prediction's got to tweak a little bit now.
Exactly.
We've got to pivot and wave with what we're seeing in front of us.
Yeah, so you do need to keep reviewing it. And like I've said earlier, keep reaching out to people like yourself, accountants, other people in the same trade as you, who can give you that advice. And, pay close attention to trends as well. Look at what's going on in the wider world, not just your little bit of it.
Zone, yeah.
But, there's something that might be happening just over here. It's somewhere like you can pivot towards that and grow your business further. So it's be open-minded.
Yeah.
This is my vision, this is what I'm doing for the next 25 years. Absolutely not. Things will come along to change that. Yeah, so just be open, be flexible.
Smashing. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're most welcome.
Precious advice that you're giving my community out
Hope
there.
so.
And, and thank you again.
Yeah, pleasure. Cheers, Neil. Thank you.